April 6th, 46 BC. On the plains outside the North African city of Thapsus, two Roman armies faced one another for what would become one of the final great battles of the Roman Republic. On one side stood Gaius Julius Caesar, Rome's most brilliant general, hardened by years of brutal civil war. Opposing him were the last powerful defenders of the old republican order, a coalition of Roman senators, Pompeian loyalists, and the powerful Numidian kingdom, led by Metellus Scipio and Juba I of Numidia. They had elephants, they had numbers, and they believed they had the advantage. But by sunset, the fate of the Roman Republic would be sealed. The Battle of Thapsus would prove to be one of the decisive turning points in Caesar's civil war. After Caesar's decisive victory at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, his rival senators and commanders refused to accept his victory. They regrouped in North Africa, forming a new army under Metellus Scipio. In late 47 BC, Caesar launched an invasion of North Africa. After severe hardship, he was eventually relieved by reinforcements from Italy. By early 46 BC, Caesar commanded roughly 8 legions, with auxiliaries included. His force numbered perhaps 50,000 to 70,000 troops. He was still outnumbered. The confrontation came near the coastal city of Thapsus in modern Tunisia. Scipio attempted to trap Caesar between his army and the sea. He constructed fortified camps and defensive lines around the area. Caesar responded with his usual energy. He began building massive siege works to isolate the city and force Scipio to attack. Trenches, ramparts, walls stretching across the plains. The Pompeian army could not allow this to continue. Eventually, Scipio decided to deploy his army and force battle. The stage was set. The Pompeian coalition formed a massive battle line. As much as 70 to 90,000 troops stood across the field from Caesar. It's worth noting that the bulk of Numidian contingents under King Juba and a sizable force of Pompeian cavalry led by Caesar's once trusted right-hand man, Titus Labienus, were stationed south of Thapsus to blockade Caesar's force and prevent them from retreating. At the Pompeian center stood approximately 50 to 60,000 auxiliary legions, mustered from North Africa, Spain, and parts of the Mediterranean. These troops were neither as battle-experienced nor as hardened as Caesar's legions. On each wing were thousands of auxiliary and Numidian cavalry, with perhaps 60 to 80 war elephants at the front. The elephants were a terrifying weapon, unfamiliar to many Roman soldiers. Caesar prepared carefully. He arranged his main body of legions into multiple lines. Knowing the danger of elephants, he stationed archers and slingers to target the animals, as well as leaving his 5th Legion in reserve to handle the beasts. The battlefield waited in tense silence. But suddenly, the calm shattered. According to ancient sources, Caesar's troops, particularly those of Legio X and Legio VII, grew impatient. They were veteran legions who were tired of the endless campaigning and wanted to return home. Without waiting for a formal signal, they surged forward. Caesar's hand was forced. The battle had begun. He gathered the rest of his force and ordered a full-on offensive. Caesar's legions attempted to keep pace with his right flank, but they were already too far ahead of the rest of the column. Legio X and VII ferociously crashed into Scipio's left flank. With pilums raining down from above, the scenes were chaotic. Neither Caesar or Scipio was prepared for such a sporadic maneuver. The main bodies of infantry clashed at the center. Tens of thousands of heavy legionaries duked it out in a vicious display of close-quarter combat. On the Pompeian wings, Scipio's elephants charged directly toward the Roman wings. Caesar's archers and slingers were ready and prepared. They loosed projectiles at the oncoming elephants. The elephants on Scipio's left were routed before they even reached the Roman lines. In the process, they turned and aggressively charged backward toward their own cavalry lines, leading to panic and then a full-on rout. The key moment of the battle came on Caesar's left flank. There, the elephants charged directly toward the Roman lines. But Caesar's men had been prepared. The soldiers of Legio V, veterans of the Gallic Wars, held their ground. They hurled pila. They targeted the elephants' eyes. They blasted horns and trumpets. The noise and pain overwhelmed the animals. Instead of smashing the Roman line, many elephants turned around. They stampeded back into their own army. Panic spread instantly. Numidian cavalry scattered. There are conflicted reports suggesting that the elephants may have crashed into their own infantry lines. But these wouldn't appear to be logical, as the fleeing beasts would not look to charge toward the loud noises of the clashing soldiers, and would have opted to run in the safest direction instead. With Scipio's most potent threat now removed from the field of battle, his elephants and cavalry, the battle would come down to the infantry, with Caesar's veterans being the obvious favorites. Seeing the enemy weakening, Caesar ordered a steady advance. His legions moved forward with brutal discipline. Shields locked. The Pompeian army fought hard, but momentum was gone. Roman fought Roman in savage hand-to-hand combat. Caesar's veterans had years of experience fighting together, giving them the edge. Gradually, his right flank pushed the Pompeian left to its breaking point. For whatever unspecified reason, Caesar did not use his cavalry to attack the now exposed flanks of his enemy. The best assumption, given the circumstances, was that he wanted to hold them in reserve in case Scipio's cavalry, who fled early on in the battle, tried to initiate a false retreat. Therefore, if they returned, Caesar could use his cavalry as well as the 5th Legion to repel them. After all, Caesar had enough faith in his veteran troops to overcome Scipio's lesser experienced troops. And as the fighting slugged on, he was right to do so. With his most elite troops carving their way through the Pompeian left, it didn't take long until Scipio's left flank realized its predicament. They were utterly outclassed. They shattered and began running for their lives. Soon after, the rest of Scipio's army broke out in a panic and fled. The remnants of the Pompeian army was utterly defeated. During the fighting, the garrison stationed at Thapsus launched a sortie against Caesar's siege lines. Their attack, however, was repelled by the 2 legions he had left behind to maintain the blockade. After driving the defenders back, these soldiers marched south to reinforce the forces positioned opposite the camp of Afranius and King Juba. Once united, they assaulted Afranius's camp and quickly captured it. They then prepared to advance against Labienus and the Numidian forces. Before the attack could begin, however, Juba's allied troops abandoned their positions, effectively deciding the outcome of the battle. Caesar then moved toward the Pompeian camp, only to discover that it had already been taken. At this point, he lost control of his troops, who began massacring the defeated enemy. Roughly 10,000 of the opposing soldiers were killed, and those who survived the fighting were cut down by enraged legionaries, despite Caesar repeatedly ordering that their lives be spared. According to Plutarch, some sources claim that Caesar suffered an epileptic seizure shortly before he ordered his lines to advance, creating confusion and contributing to the breakdown in discipline. Caesar's own losses may have reached about 1,000 men, though no precise figure survives.